Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you this morning?
Very, very well, thank you. And we're going to be searching again for the good news.
Well, it's a little tougher.
How do you think we're going to do today? Will we find something? We always find something good.
We have one positive thing.
Except we have to sort of blind ourselves to some of the horrors that some people have to put up. To me, the most important thing is getting people to sort of, be more perspective on finding the people who are going to tell them the truth.
Yeah.
It's not so much one is good news or one is bad news. I remember during the campaign, I had a compliment from a young student, and he said, "I really like what you're doing because you're so optimistic." I said, "I just talked for an hour on all the problems you guys are inheriting." He said, "Yeah, but we can tell you're telling the truth." So sometimes the truth, prevails, and it is every bit as important, if not the whole thing, about trying to get the facts of what's going on. Well, right now we're searching for the facts, dealing with Bucha, little old town in Ukraine, and it looks like there was a massacre.
Yeah.
And if you go by assessing what the popular media is saying, boy, I'll tell you what, those Russians really did it.
Awful.
We know the Russians aren't perfect, and they have a bad history, but the whole thing is our side has used propaganda ruthlessly and very successfully.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, I look at all the news, and you can expect the far left, the anti-Trump people, the people who used to be against war during the in the 60s and against the war in Vietnam, and the progressives. We don't know where they are right now, but anyway, you can't depend on those stations, and then even the stations that we consider, more conservative and more open to the ideas of non-aggression and, an interventionist foreign policy. There's a little bit of noise, but actually they're split pretty well, and you hear the same old thing. So I would say just what is being available to about 95% of the people, because they don't go into, not 95%, they don't watch our programs, so they don't get exposed. I would say 95% of the people have been exposed and have absolutely been convinced of the reason why we have to be 100% behind anything and everything NATO does.
Yeah.
And of course, this is what happened, and views were shifted. Even the beginning of this, people don't know too much about 2014, but the propaganda is so powerful. So right now, if you didn't have anything else to go on, and I had to jump to a conclusion, I'm very suspicious of what we're hearing, just who has been doing what. All I know is I don't like war, and I don't like the killing, and I don't like policies that I think lead up to it, and I feel a greater responsibility for the country in which I live to speak out, especially having been in politics. I mean, if people don't speak out that have a perception of this, there's not much else we can do. We can complain about it, but right now, I'll tell you what, to shift the attitude, look how powerful that establishment was in beating the war drums for the war against COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, that was astounding what they accomplished. But anyway, it's out there now, and we've heard lots of things going on, but the bottom line is not in, and we're very much aware that throughout history and in recent history, there's been a lot of false flags, probably all the way back in our country, Spanish-American War, a few places like that.
Yeah, the thing to emphasize at first is we do not know what happened in this small town. I've seen some pictures that we won't show, but it is very grisly. It's very horrible and disgusting. It looks like at least dozens, if not more, civilians dead, many with their hands tied behind their backs. We don't know who did it, but I think we do know, because we've been in this business long enough, going back before the show, and back to the days of Colin Powell and at the UN, et cetera, that if everyone agrees, quote unquote, in the U.S., all the media, all the neocons, all the neoliberals, if they all agree on that one thing means one thing, then our antenna go up. It doesn't mean we instinctively disagree, but our antenna does go up, and this is exactly what's happening. And we have our friend Joe Loria at Consortium News to thank for a very concise look at the timeline of what happened. And this is what's interesting. We can put that first one up because here's his article if anyone wants to go read it. Consortiumnews.com. He wrote a piece, Questions Abound About Bucha Massacre. And here's a couple of things, okay, just in a nutshell. So the news broke on Sunday that hundreds of innocent people were slaughtered in Bucha, not far from Kiev. Immediately, of course, it was blamed on Russia. Russia did it. The U.S. pundits, the think tank warriors, they called for direct conflict. This is time to really go to war with Russia over these few dozen people or however many there were. Now, Russia did an interesting thing. They immediately called for a special session of the UN Security Council. They said, we immediately need to talk about this immediately. The UK chairs the council right now, and they said no. They said no twice, which is suspicious. Why don't they want to immediately take up the issue, especially when you have the evidence sitting there in the street that really needs an impartial investigation immediately? So here's the timeline, and Joe does a great job talking about it. Last Wednesday, all Russian forces were out of Bucha. We know this because, and put up that next one, the smiling mayor of the city, he announced on his Facebook page, this is on Thursday, and this is him speaking, March 31st, the day of liberation of Bucha. This was announced by Bucha Mayor Anatoly Fedoruk. This day will go down in the glorious history of Bucha and the entire Bucha community as a day of liberation by the armed forces from the Russian occupier. So on Thursday, the mayor is down there in the town square talking about how it's liberated. He doesn't say a word about the massacre. Hundreds of people, and we've seen the video, and we won't show it here, hundreds of people, or at least dozens, littering the main streets of the town, dead left and right. And here's the mayor on TV smiling, doesn't say a word about it. It's possible he didn't know, but it's very unusual that the mayor wouldn't say, we've liberated, but my gosh, at what cost? He didn't do that. So the town was fully in Ukrainian control for 4 days. For 4 days, Wednesday through Sunday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, before there was any word of a massacre. It only broke on Sunday. And this is all from Joe's piece. The New York Times reported from Bucha on Saturday. As late as Saturday, they did not report a massacre. They reported 6 civilians found dead, and they found a lot of dead soldiers, but they didn't report a massacre, the New York Times. Then all of a sudden, Sunday, the news broke that there was this massacre. Interestingly enough, and Joe brings up a post by a EU and US funded Gorshenin Institute, who reported that special forces have begun a clearing operation in the city of Bucha in the Kiev region, which has been liberated by the armed forces of Ukraine. And this is interesting. The city is being cleared from saboteurs and accomplices of Russian forces. There's some speculation that the Azov battalion, which is notorious, went in there and cleared it out of Russian saboteurs. And these may be explaining the white armbands that people wore to signify that they were amenable to Russia coming in. Again, this is all from Joe's piece. We don't know the fact. Could the Russians have done it? Absolutely. War is disgusting. War is ugly. It's despicable. But we have to at least raise some questions. The Russian troops who left Bucha were called in a very, very rapid way to go join the fight in Donbass. So they get the call, leave Bucha, the real battle's in Donbass, and they get in their cars. But before leaving, they tie up a few hundred people at random and kill them, and take all the time to do that and all the effort to do that and all, frankly, sadly, the wasted bullets to do that before departing. Again, all possible. War makes people insane because war is insane. But at the very least, I think, Dr. Paul, just like we've done in Syria, where a couple of these gas attacks turned out to be false flags, we should be suspicious, take a deep breath, and try to figure out what's going on.
You know, first question, a person who would disagree with you would say, well, where are the Ukrainians? They're not 100%, endorsing this policy that we're talking about, and they would say none of them are coming forth. And it's a good question, but that's a question we could ask ourselves when we go to war, and people in the military sometimes know, and sometimes if people do know a bit and they start to bring it out, especially under today's circumstances where our free speech movement has been killed, that if you speak out, it's very, very costly, and you can be canceled, and literally. So it's not likely when it's almost universal that when you're in a country like that, and I would say that even in this country to a large degree, not that bad, because we still do have people disagreeing, with this. So that to me is a powerful tool that they have, but it still means that we have to find them. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time. It was the same way with how they had controlled the scenario with COVID. You couldn't say a word, but every once in a while there'd be a crowd of one person would speak, and all of a sudden there were more people that agreed than you realize. And but right now we're not getting the information from somebody on the Ukrainian side witnessing, a suggestion that if they could just get to the point where, maybe a little bit of blame or a lot of blame for both sides, and that's why most wars are started, because there are warmongers on both sides, and these things happen. They may have different motivations, but the name of the game right now in this age of evil communications, it's manipulating and controlling the news, and this is a perfect example of it. And it leads to frustration, but it leads us to think that the truth is out there. We admit we don't have the full facts, but we are going to keep looking. And just think of what happened the other day when Fauci revealed himself, or somebody revealed him, and found out that he thought the best thing in the world to control viruses would be natural immunity. He was a great spokesman for it. So the truth does come out, but this one is locked in place for this weekend anyway. What happens next week is a different story.
Yeah. Well, it's obviously huge propaganda value for the Ukrainian side. The EU immediately announced it was suspending the purchase of coal and I think a few other things from Russia. It's a huge propaganda value for the Ukrainians, and that's probably why President Zelensky rushed out there for some photo ops as soon as it came known that it happened. There's zero upside for the Russians. There's zero reason for them to do it. There's no military reason. The only reason would be if they literally had gone insane and decided to kill a bunch of people, which does happen. Crazy things happen in war. The U.S. in Fallujah did a lot of that as well. So it does happen. But when you talk about the huge upside for Ukraine and the huge downside for Russia, again, we don't know what happened, but we're suspicious when the media, as one, declares that one thing is truth. And ironically, we talked about it before the show, it's 5 years to the day that we talked about the Khan Sheikhoun so-called gas attack, which turned out to be not Assad, but turned out to be our wonderful moderate rebels who did it as a false flag.
In many ways, there's so much masochism going on, maybe masochism with a motive.
Yeah.
And so you say all this is going on, and one of the biggest economic crises in Europe is they've done which they said they wouldn't do, and the United States would always provide, and we want to sell you the gas, and we're not going to let the Russians do it. And what they do, they resort to coal. They have coal, and coal is not quite as dirty as they claim. And all of a sudden, they say, "Oh, okay, we're going to boycott it."
Yeah.
It further punished the people.
Yeah.
Put the punishment on. But you wonder. I wonder about it. Masochism can be considered just plain disease, but it also can be collective political masochism. Not quite realizing that this self-inflicted pain, it doesn't work out all as well as they think it will.
And it'll be interesting to see how the European civilians, because you make a good point, they're bearing the pain right now of this, how they'll react. We saw two basically earthquake elections this past weekend in Hungary and in Serbia, which went against what the Brussels wants. We have a big election coming up in France this weekend where Macron and Le Pen are getting much closer in numbers. Macron's numbers are going down and Le Pen's are coming up. It'll be interesting to see if the people of Europe continue to vote against the elites. They're doing this, but we have some better news for our middle segment, and that's a little bit of a follow-up from Elon Musk. He bought a bunch of Twitter. He's been talking for at least days, if not weeks, about Twitter abandoning its free speech commitment. So he bought a big chunk of it, and then today he was appointed to the board of directors of Twitter. He vows to make significant improvements. And let's put up that next clip, because look what happened to Twitter stock, Dr. Paul. Right when he was announced, on April 4th that Musk was taking over. Obviously, and this is your area of expertise, Dr. Paul, looks to me at least, though, like the market has spoken.
Yeah, I think so. And I think what's going on now is, we just painted a dire picture, for what's going on in Ukraine, trying to figure out what's going on. Then all of a sudden, the control of the media, there's a break in the barrage against free speech.
Yeah.
And it's coming with Elon Musk. I haven't met him. No. But I sure hope that what I hear and what I like, that'll continue that way, because he has said some good things. But there's been a lot of people that have said good things in the past, and they don't follow through. But this is something that I think is good, because Dorsey, who started Twitter, he actually has said some things that indicate that that his position isn't as ruthless as we see it, and that he was just super gun-ho for wokeism. So he was sort of apologetic for not having done things positively. Maybe he has been enlightened, but maybe the stock that was going down was part of his wakening up in a true sense of the word. At the same time, the thing that is going on with Musk, maybe he'll be a lightning rod for good, you know. We didn't say, holy man, who knows? Maybe Facebook might be the biggest champion of liberty before we know it.
And remember that Jack Dorsey was known for the statement, "We are the free speech corner of the free speech movement." Very, very actively in the early days, talking about it being a free speech platform. And obviously it's changed significantly since then. A lot of wokeists took over. They did a lot of purges, not only of the right, as conservatives would argue, but of people on the left as well. Anyone basically challenging the deep state narrative in doing it effectively was canceled. Myself, I was canceled, as everyone knows, in 2019. Wouldn't mind coming back. Wouldn't mind having Elon Musk on the show, right? We could ask him in person. But I have a couple of tweets just to kind of reflect on what's happened in this past day, because it's been very exciting. And here's the current CEO, Parag Agrawal. Here's what he said today. He tweeted, "I'm excited to share that we're appointing Elon Musk to our board. Through conversations with Elon in recent weeks, it became clear to us that he would bring value to our board. He's both a passionate believer and intense critic of the service, which is exactly what we need on Twitter and in the boardroom to make us stronger in the long term. Welcome, Elon." You got to wonder what he really thinks, but that's okay. Let's go to the next one. And so Elon responded. That next clip, if you can. He responded, "Looking forward to working with Parag and Twitter board to make significant improvements in Twitter in the coming months." And Jack Dorsey himself chimes in. Let's go to the next one. Dorsey is obviously still involved. "I'm really happy Elon is joining the Twitter board. He cares deeply about our world and Twitter's role in it. Parag and Elon both lead with their hearts, and they will be an incredible team." Interesting.
That has to be good.
Yeah.
Onward.
Yeah, onward.
Yeah, really good.
I wanted to ask you, if you don't mind, I know we want to go on to the last one, but I wanted to just do a couple things about Parag, because I think he may be some of the source of the problems. And here's 3 tweets from him, or 3 quotes from him. Because you see, Elon is definitely saying, "I'm for free speech," and Twitter is messing up because they're restricting it. Parag is pretending that he's thrilled that Elon's coming in. I suspect it might be different. And here's some insight into Parag's thinking. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. He said, "Our role is not to be bound by the First Amendment, but our role is to serve a healthy public conversation. And our moves are reflective of the things that we," and go to the next one, this is back in 2020, "that we believe lead to a healthier public conversation. The kinds of things that we do to work about this is to focus less on thinking about free speech, but thinking about how the times," next one, "less about free speech, but thinking about how the times have changed. One of the changes today that we see is speech is easy on the internet. Most people can speak, but our role, which is particularly emphasized, is who can be heard." That is not encouraging. That was almost 2 years ago, and we saw where Twitter went after he reflected this idea that, hey, we're not about free speech, we're about who gets to speak and who doesn't get to speak. And maybe this is the pendulum switching the other way.
Well, to me, that suggests that things are relative and they're arbitrary. Yes, we will have a discussion on our terms. You know, they don't address the real principle of freedom of speech, but they indicate they're on that side, actually to neutralize the criticism. And it's sort of like the argument about, you know, the authoritarians are always for peace.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody's for peace, but they say, yeah, but what are the circumstances? Well, you know, under the circumstances, we have our peace and you have yours. But we shouldn't have to worry about it, Daniel. We've solved that problem after World War II. We got this thing called the United Nations, and they will be the great arbitrators, and they'll come in and settle these disputes. But you already mentioned today that the UN is not the solution.
They don't want to talk about it.
So,
well, the next one we have, we can put that up. This is from the Telegraph, the UK Telegraph. Wimbledon's coming, Dr. Paul. I used to be a huge tennis, I used to watch tennis constantly. I don't anymore. I've returned to playing it a little bit. I love the sport. This is from the Telegraph of yesterday. Wimbledon is ready to ban Daniil Medvedev over fears that a Russian win could boost Vladimir Putin's regime. This is the world's #2 tennis player. He did not invade Ukraine. He hits a ball around for a living, and he's very good at it. But Wimbledon, which is a private organization, they're considering banning him from playing because if he happens to win, it's a boost for Putin.
yeah, propaganda to deal with. But hopefully there's some public pressure that might change this. But you know, what bothers me the most is the whole concept of sports that I talk about a lot because I think sports, I look at it as very positive.
Yeah.
Because I've seen it happen with kids, I've seen it with races and all kinds of things. In a natural way, things come together. Even politically speaking, because we did a little sports in the Congress. And when you did sports with the opposition, it did something.
Yeah.
There was a difference. And I think about as bad as the situation was under Nixon, there was a contest going on, you know, and it was a sporting attitude. So I like that. I thought it was ridiculous what they did when the Russians, Soviets, went into Afghanistan, and Carter said, well, we're not going to go to the Olympics, you know. But don't worry, they've worked hard. We'll just mint them a gold coin and give them a gold coin and everything will be okay. That's not using sports in the right way. But sometimes it's totally ignored, but sometimes it's used in a perverse way.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what they're doing here. They're using sports. They do this, and you could also, you know, say that they're using sex perversely when you have transgenderism going on and driving people nuts on, oh, what am I going to do?
Yeah,
you don't know about this. They keep winning all the races. Oh, shock.
Yeah.
Transgender are pretty fast runners when you compare them to women.
Yeah.
But no, we don't. But the problem is we can't define a woman yet, and that's why there's no way to solve that problem because can you define a man? Can you define? No, we can't do that. Everybody's free right. That's about as anarchist you can get.
Yeah, no, good.
So, but that's a shame that they're using it that way, and I hope there is building some resistance to that. But so it's still out there. We see movement this way, movement that way, and we just want to push the movement in the right direction where there's more freedom of expression, more concentration on what the First Amendment really means. I am convinced it may be the most important amendment because if we can't talk about this and express ourselves without penalty, you know, it's hard to persuade people. You all of a sudden have to say, well, if I can't even talk, I'm going to have to use force, and that would be bad. So I think that makes a big difference, and we have been challenged. But that happens all the time in all societies. It's been happening in our country probably since the beginning of our country. You know, that the one side would try to block the other side, certainly during the Civil War, continuously. But in our country, the way I see it, there's been a steady erosion. But now it's silly season. Now we don't even have to have the government blocking free speech. We have this coalition of the corporate world in business with the government,
Yeah.
and the corporations become the policemen. So there needs to be an exposure of what's really going on there, because we have to maintain the right of free expression. But even that cannot be squelched completely. There's always a way. There was always some freedom, in an authoritarian society. I always borrow it at Solzhenitsyn. He was born and grew up in a Soviet system, and he suffered the consequences of it. But you know what? He ended up understanding a lot about freedom. He understood a lot about spiritual beliefs in that authoritarian society. So it does exist. I don't think you can kill it all.
Yeah.
But what we want to do is we want to fertilize those ideas and let those ideas grow. And one thing is, control of speech is the biggest challenge that we are facing today.
The thing that really is depressing about this whole idea of banning a Russian tennis player because of his nationality and ethnic background is that you think that we have moved past this. Remember what happened to German Americans in World War I and how they were treated. We all know what happened to Japanese Americans in World War II when they were taken away from their homes and put in internment camps. This idea of collective punishment of a race, and in fact, you could go to Hitler himself, right, who believed in collective punishment, even if it was absolutely unjustified, of a race or people of a certain background because of the characteristics of their background. I mean, I'm with you. I like to think that society is progressing, but when you see something like this, and it's not just Medvedev. I've seen dozens of stories of opera singers, orchestra conductors, other sports celebrities, other people who are being canceled just because of their ethnic or national background. They didn't invade Ukraine. Even if you think that Putin is the absolute worst thing since Hitler, there's no way that Medvedev did anything except hit tennis balls. He shouldn't be punished because of his race. You'd think this would be a no-brainer, but sadly we're going back to the knuckle-dragging Neanderthal days of World War II.
And you mentioned the discrimination for race and culture and that sort of thing. But what about being discriminated against because you want to debate and talk about science and traditional science, and of course I'm referring to natural immunity, and that is used, and you're discriminated against that. It really spreads political ideas and now scientific ideas, but still, truth is out there. And I think there are still, I love to see when there's an explosion of interest and shifting of attitudes, and it usually needs a key group of people or one person sometimes just say, we've had enough, and the people, join in because they have been harboring those same thoughts and they were just waiting for somebody to say it. So that's the reason I still want to argue my case for optimism because there's no fun doing the other.
I know. Well, unfortunately, your final little comment is not negative, is not positive, and this is about New York.
Here I am talking about how neat it's going. Yeah, I think everybody knows exactly where I stand, and that's why I am motivated, because it's not so perfect. But here, this is another example of insanity. It's masochistic for our society, self-punishment, and ruining a whole generation. And it's a new mayor, and every once in a while I hear a sentence or two coming from the new mayor, and he thinks maybe we should have policemen.
Yeah.
Maybe the hoodlums that go and burn down the city and break windows and steal, they shouldn't be released and never punished. And he's getting some positive reports on that. But this one is New York City. If he's behind this, he's not doing so well on this. New York City will mandate masks for children under 5 years old. Where did they get control? I thought they only controlled them when they went to government schools. But isn't that amazing that they're doing it? And the reports, and I know you've seen them, the reports that are coming out about the medical conditions that are long-term of kids that they're having, socializing, they're having trouble, getting along. There's more types of infections and problems with throat and nose, and the communications are bad. So, and on top of that, These are the safest group of people that are there. They're the most naturally protected of any group, and yet then they come up and you talk about thinking about liberty as not a collective thing. People should never have their liberty removed because they belong to a group, but they should never get a benefit because they belong to a group. But here it is. This is a group. And the individual, only liberty can protect the individual, because the individual and the responsible individual, the parents maybe, make these decisions. But when you have the mayor and one other person come in, and we're going to write this law, and if you have a kid under 5, he will wear a mask or he better stay in the house.
Terrible.
So that's a contradiction to all those positive things I just said a few minutes ago.
Yeah. Well, if you're sane and you live in New York, A, get out of New York, and B, homeschool your kids, and Google Ron Paul curriculum, because you'll find a great way to educate your kids and not let the state grab them and say all kinds of terrible things. I'm just going to finish up by, again, bringing up that mark your calendars, June 4th in Houston. We're having a conference. I believe we will be signing our contract with the hotel today. It's a nice hotel. It's in a great location. And it's also, more importantly, some great speakers. Dr. Paul will be there. We have a few others to announce. I will send an update to our subscribers at the Ron Paul Institute later today with as much information as we can give today. We may not have everything today, but we'll have some info for you. And I will put in the description of today's show the link where you can click and subscribe for free to updates to the Ron Paul Institute. And of course, as you know, we never sell or rent or loan your names or your information. This is just between us. So look for that email from me later. If you're not subscribed, subscribe. I'll put it in the link. Dr. Paul, back to you.
Very good. And I want to close by once again thanking our viewers for tuning in. It's so important that you come and listen to us and promote our programs. And we expect to be here for a while fighting the battle and looking for these examples that are so contradictory. You talk about today, my whole talk I pushed and tried to explain why we should have some optimism. There's good things that can happen. There's always a reservoir for optimism and good things, and ideas are that way. And then there's also the people who are totally controlled by the fanaticism of our universities and the people who end up in the corporate welfare system. Corporatism they accept for all kinds of reasons, political power as well as the accumulation of great wealth. So there is a contest going on, but it's not new. The United States didn't invent it, but we've been involved. The world is a mess, and we have some responsibilities that should be carried out in a voluntary manner, but basically in a political sense, we have enough to do right here on trying to deal with our problems. And as far as I'm concerned, it's not complicated. People just have to understand the tremendous benefits of what a free society provides. I believe it's the source of the greatest amount of wealth that ever conceived, having a free society, and certainly one that is the safest and least likely to have wars. But it's not a perfect system. It is tough, but at least you have to have a goal. You have to always be seeking that goal. There is no way in the world that we're going to have perfect freedom in anybody's lifetime, as far as I'm concerned. And there's no way the enemy is going to have perfect dictatorial power. It is an ongoing process. We have to just decide what side we're on. Are we seeking truth and doing what we can to spread to the best of our ability those views, or are we going to allow and be complacent and just allow somebody else to roll over us and say, buddy, you're canceled, too bad? No, we have to make sure that we participate in this great debate. And I'll tell you what, there's reason for us to harbor some optimism, because if truth didn't exist and you couldn't seek it, and some people don't believe truth exists, it justifies them not even seeking it. They're nihilists. They say, "No, you guys are nuts. Why waste all this time? You know, there is no such thing as truth." Well, I don't endorse that, but there are people out there, and that's one of the reasons why the contest is pretty tough, because they do get in position of power and control of that message in the media. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.